The silence in a gun store is the loudest sound you will ever hear. I'm not talking about the quiet hum of a slow Tuesday morning. I am talking about the dead, heavy silence of a shelf that used to hold 5,000 rounds of ammunition and now holds nothing but dust and a handwritten sign that says, "Limit one box per customer." You have seen it before. You walk in, credit card burning a hole in your pocket, ready to stock up for the weekend, but the air in the room feels different. The clerks look tired. The glass cases are smeared with fingerprints from desperate customers who came before you. And when you look behind the counter, where the stacks of green and white boxes usually sit like bricks of gold, there is just empty steel. That feeling in the pit of your stomach, that sinking realization that you waited too long, that you are now defenseless in a market that cares nothing for your safety, is a feeling you cannot afford to have in 2025. The panic buy isn't coming. It is already scratching at the door. The logistics chains are straining, raw material costs are skyrocketing, and the political winds are shifting in ways that threaten to choke off the supply of the very tools you rely on to protect your life and your liberty. Welcome back to Gun and Gavel. I am your host, and today we are not just talking about shooting at paper targets. We are talking about the forensic, legal, and tactical reality of survival economics. We are diving deep into the ballistics that win gunfights and the supply chains that lose wars. If you are not stacking these specific calibers right now, you are preparing to fail. Before we dissect the anatomy of the coming shortage, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It's a small motion for you, strictly voluntary, but it signals the algorithm that you want real, unfiltered analysis on the intersection of firepower and the law. It helps us keep this channel alive in an environment that loves to censor what we do. Now, let's clear the chamber, focus our minds, and get into the deep dive of the 7 calibers you need to own before the gavel drops on the ammunition market. Let's begin with a round that has fundamentally changed the landscape of modern tactical shooting, a round that bridges the gap between a pistol's silence and a rifle's lethality. We are talking about the 300 Blackout. If you have ever studied the ballistics of close-quarters combat, you know that the greatest enemy in a home defense scenario isn't just the intruder. It is the chaotic, deafening overpressure of a supersonic round fired in a hallway. You fire a standard rifle round indoors without ear protection, and you are instantly disoriented. Your communication is cut off, and you are legally liable for every round that overpenetrates through your drywall and into your neighbor's living room. This is where 300 Blackout shines, specifically when you look at the subsonic loads. When you load a 2 on 20 grain subsonic round into a suppressed AR pistol, the mechanics of the engagement change entirely. This cartridge was purpose-built for special operations groups who needed the hitting power of a 30 caliber projectile, but the silence of an MP5. It is not just about being quiet, it is about tactical dominance. A subsonic 300 Blackout round does not crack the sound barrier. It leaves the muzzle with a heavy, dull thump, hitting the target with the mass of a 45 ACP but the ballistic coefficient of a rifle round. From a legal defense perspective, using a suppressed firearm can be controversial in court. Prosecutors love to paint it as the tool of an assassin. But from a hearing preservation and command and control perspective, it is unmatched. You can communicate with your family. You can hear the police arriving. You maintain situational awareness. However, the versatility of this round is what makes it a logistical nightmare during a panic. You can swap magazines and instantly switch to a supersonic 110 grain Barnes TAC TX load. Suddenly, that same short-barreled rifle is capable of reaching out past 200 yards with hydrostatic shock that rivals the Soviet 7.62x39. But here's the catch. Finding 300 Blackout when the supply chain breaks is nearly impossible. It is a boutique round compared to the military standards. Right now, in 2025, we are seeing prices fluctuate wildly between 90 cents and $1.50 per trigger pull. Defensive loads like Sig Sauer's Elite Match or Hornady's AMAX are already hitting back order lists. If you have built your primary defensive strategy around a 300 Blackout platform, you are betting your life on a supply chain that is much more fragile than the NATO standards. You need to be buying this now, not when the panic sets in, because when the shelves clear, 300 Blackout is the first to go and the last to come back. Now, we move from the specialist to the generalist, the old warhorse that has been putting bodies in the ground and food on the table for over half a century. We are talking about the 308 Winchester. In the world of forensics and ballistics, the 308 is the baseline by which all other full-power cartridges are measured. It is the round that defined the concept of the scout rifle, and remains a favorite of police sharpshooters and military-designated marksmen across the globe. Why? Because it offers a balance of barrier penetration, range, and terminal energy that is difficult to beat. When society destabilizes, or even when the power just goes out for a week, you don't need a specialist. You need a round that can punch through a car door, drop an elk at 400 yards, and stop a threat decisively without question. The ballistics of the 308 are a study in consistency. A typical load pushes a 147 to 180 grain bullet at velocities between 2,600 and 2,800 feet per second. When we talk about stopping power in court, we are often discussing the transfer of kinetic energy. A 168 grain match load does not just poke a hole. It delivers a massive amount of energy that creates a temporary stretch cavity capable of rupturing organs that the bullet didn't even touch. I have run 308 bolt guns out past 800 yards, and the round is predictable. It fights the wind well, it hits like a freight train. But the logistical footprint of the 308 is its downfall in a survival scenario. These cartridges are heavy. They are bulky. If you are trying to carry a combat loadout, you will feel every ounce of difference between a 308 and a smaller intermediate cartridge. Furthermore, from a manufacturing standpoint, they consume more brass, more powder, and more lead than almost anything else. When raw materials get scarce, manufacturers produce fewer 308 rounds per hour than they do 9mm or 5.56. We are seeing prices hover around $1.20 for match-grade stuff, but in a panic, I have seen that triple overnight. The 308 is the prepper's gold standard, which means when the hoarding starts, the rural landowners and the long-range shooters sweep the inventory clean. If you rely on an AR-10, an M1A, or a bolt-action scout rifle, you cannot rely on scavenging this ammo. You must have your stockpile secured in your basement before the news cycle turns grim. Let's shift gears to a caliber that has a cult following for a reason, a round that was born from the failures of the 1986 FBI Miami shootout. We are talking about the 10mm auto. This is not a round for the novice. It is a round for the ballistics connoisseur who understands that sometimes 9mm just isn't enough. The history here is fascinating for any student of gun and gavel. After the Miami shootout, where agents failed to stop suspects despite multiple hits, the FBI demanded a round with more power. They got the 10mm. It was powerful, so powerful that it broke the guns and the wrists of the agents trying to qualify with it. It was abandoned for the 40 S&W, but it never died. And now, in 2025, it is back with a vengeance. Loading a 10mm into a Glock 20 or a Springfield XDM Elite feels different. The recoil impulse is sharp, authoritative. You are pushing a 200-grain hardcast bullet at velocities that can crack the engine block of a vehicle or penetrate the skull of a grizzly bear. This is the Woods Carry King. If you are hiking in black bear country, or if you are in an urban environment where you might need to defeat heavy winter clothing or light barriers, the 10mm is unmatched in a semi-automatic pistol platform. It delivers energy levels approaching the 41 Magnum, but with the capacity of a modern striker-fired handgun. However, legal caution is required here. In a self-defense shooting, a prosecutor might argue that carrying a bear killer round in a suburban environment shows an intent to kill rather than an intent to stop. They will look at the over-penetration risks. A full-power 10mm round can easily pass through a human target and strike a bystander down the block. This is why bullet selection is critical. You need defensive hollow points that expand rapidly to dump that energy into the threat, not the scenery behind them. But finding those specific loads? Good luck. 10mm is the definition of a production run caliber. Manufacturers make it in batches. When a batch sells out, you might wait 6 months for the next one. With the rise of 10mm carbines and pistols, demand is stripping supply bare. You can find range ammo for maybe 55 cents a round, but the premium defensive stuff, the Underwood, the double tap, is becoming unobtainium. If you carry the centimeter, you need to stack it deep right now. Now, we pivot to the undisputed king of versatility, the shotgun, specifically the 12 gauge. In the eyes of the law, the shotgun is often viewed as the gentleman's weapon or the farmer's tool, but tactically, it is the most devastating close-range weapon system on the planet. There is a reason it has stayed in the arsenal of police departments and military units for a century. The sound of a pump-action racking is a universal language, but we are interested in the ballistics. A single round of .00 buckshot sends 8 or 9 .33 caliber pellets downrange at 1,300 feet per second. That is the equivalent of emptying a subcompact pistol into a target with a single pull of the trigger. The 12 gauge is a systems approach to ballistics. You are not marrying one bullet type. You can load birdshot for small game, buckshot for defense, and slugs for turning cover into concealment. A 1-ounce slug hits with enough force to stop a vehicle. But this versatility creates a supply paradox, because everyone owns a 12 gauge, from the duck hunter to the riot policeman. The demand is universal. When a panic hits, the 12 gauge aisle is decimated by every demographic of gun owner. We are already seeing shortages in premium defensive loads like Federal Flight Control, which uses a specialized wad to keep patterns tight. Furthermore, shotgun ammunition is bulky. It takes up massive amounts of warehouse space and shipping weight. During a logistics crisis, retailers would rather ship a pallet of 50,000 rounds of 9mm than a pallet of 5,000 shotgun shells. The profit density isn't there. This means 12 gauge is often the last to be restocked. We are seeing prices for slugs and buckshot climb past $1 a shell. If you are sitting on a Mossberg 590 or a Remington 870 and you don't have at least 500 rounds of mixed-duty ammo, you are holding a very expensive club. The ability to scavenge 12 gauge is a myth in a true shortage. It vanishes instantly. Let's dial it down to the smallest round on the list, but perhaps the most critical for long-term survival, the .22 long rifle. Do not laugh. In the forensic archives, the .22 LR has ended more lives than many centerfire cartridges simply due to its ubiquity. It is the assassin's choice for a reason: quiet, low flash, and capable of bouncing around inside the skull if it penetrates the cranial cavity. But for the preparedness-minded individual, the .22 LR is about economics and sustenance. You can carry 500 rounds of .22 LR in a cargo pocket. You can hunt squirrels, rabbits, and small game to keep yourself fed without alerting everyone within 3 miles to your position. It is the ultimate training tool. When ammo prices for centerfire rounds hit $1 a shot, you can still keep your skills sharp with .22 LR for pennies. But here is the trap. Because it is cheap, people assume it will always be there. History tells us otherwise. In the great ammo shortage of 2013, .22 LR didn't just get expensive, it ceased to exist. People were camping out at big box stores at 4 a.m. just to fight over a single brick of Thunderbolt. Manufacturing rimfire ammo is a different process than centerfire. It requires specific priming methods and tooling. When manufacturers are rushing to churn out 5.56 and 9mm for government contracts, the .22 lines get throttled down. It is a low-margin product. They don't make money on it compared to the big stuff. So when the supply dries up, it stays dry for years. If you have a Ruger 1022 or a dedicated conversion kit for your AR, you need to be sitting on 10,000 rounds of this stuff. It sounds like a lot, but it fits in a couple of ammo cans and costs less than a new optic. In a barter economy, .22 LR will be the currency of the realm. Now we arrive at the political lightning rod, the caliber that is constantly in the crosshairs of legislation and litigation, the .22-23 Remington and .556 NATO. If you own an AR-15, this is your lifeblood. But you need to understand the nuance here. .556 NATO is loaded to higher chamber pressures than .223 Remington. While most modern rifles can handle both, the distinction matters when we talk about defensive ballistics. We are looking at lightweight projectiles, usually 55 to 77 grains, moving at blistering speeds of over 3,000 feet per second. The wounding mechanism of the .556 is reliant on velocity. When that tiny bullet hits tissue at high speed, it destabilizes and fragments, creating a massive permanent wound cavity that is disproportionate to its size. This is what makes it so effective for military and police use. But it is also what makes it the primary target for gun control advocates. Every time there is a high-profile incident, the gun and gavel aspect heats up. Politicians draft bills to ban military-grade ammunition, and the panic buying begins instantly. The 5.56 market is heavily tied to military contracts. Lake City, the massive ammunition plant that supplies the U.S. military, often dictates the civilian supply. If the government needs ammo for a new conflict, the civilian tap gets turned off. We have seen this happen repeatedly. Right now, prices are floating between 45 and 65 cents a round, but we are one executive order or one foreign conflict away from that doubling. And unlike a bolt-action rifle, an AR-15 is a hungry beast. A standard loadout is 7 magazines. That's 210 rounds just to be combat effective once. If you go to a weekend class, you burn 1,000 rounds. You cannot buy this box by box. You need to be buying cases. You need to be stacking green tip M855 for penetration and heavy OTM loads for defense. If you wait until the news breaks to buy 5.56, you are already too late. Finally, we come to the most common pistol caliber on the face of the earth, the 9mm Luger. This is the global standard. The FBI uses it, the military uses it, the police use it, and you probably use it. The 9mm has undergone a renaissance in the last decade. Advances in bonded bullet technology, specifically rounds like the Federal HST and Speer Gold Dot, have allowed the 9mm to perform almost as well as larger calibers like the 40 and 45, but with higher capacity and lower recoil. From a legal perspective, the 9mm is the safe choice. If you are forced to defend yourself in court, using the same ammunition as the local police department is a strong defense against claims that you were using hyper-lethal or exotic ammunition. You can say, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I used the industry standard for self-protection." But the ubiquity of 9mm is a double-edged sword. Because there are more 9mm handguns in circulation than anything else, the demand is voracious. When a panic starts, the 9mm shelf is the first visual indicator of the crash. It is the canary in the coal mine. New gun owners always buy a 9mm, and they always buy 2 boxes of ammo. Multiply that by 5 million new gun owners, and the supply evaporates. We are seeing training ammo creep up in price, pushing 35 cents a round, while defensive ammo is over $1. You cannot train with ammo that costs $1 a shot, but you must train to be effective. The solution is volume. You need to stack thousands of rounds of FMJ for practice and hundreds of rounds of carry ammo for social work. Do not rely on the fact that everyone makes it. Everyone buys it. That is the problem. So, where does this leave us? We are standing on the precipice of a supply chain contraction that could rival the worst shortages of the last decade. The shelves are full today, but the cracks are showing. Prices are creeping up. Availability of premium defensive loads is spotting. The laws of economics are as unforgiving as the laws of physics. When demand exceeds supply, those who hesitated are left empty-handed. This is not about fear-mongering. This is about forensic reality. A gun without ammunition is just an expensive paperweight. A stockpile of the wrong ammunition is a logistical burden. You need to assess your battery of arms. Look at your 300 blackout for home defense, your 308 for reach, your 10 miller for the woods, your 12 gauge for versatility, your 22 LR for survival, your 5.56 for liberty, and your 9mm for daily carry. These are the tools of the modern citizen. The gavel will eventually drop, whether it is a legislative gavel banning online sales or the gavel of the market pricing you out of practice. The only vote you have that truly counts right now is the vote you cast with your wallet at the ammunition counter. Stock it deep, stock it now. Because when the silence returns to the gun store, you want to be the one at home, safe, secure, and ready for whatever the world throws at you. This has been Gun and Gavel. If you found value in this deep dive, make sure you are subscribed. Train hard, stay legal, and keep your powder dry. I'll see you in the next one.